Step back in time to the 1700s. The heavy wooden door of a colonial tavern swings open, and the warmth of a roaring fire washes over you. This wasn't just a place to eat, it was the heart of a community, a bustling hub where news, politics, and friendship were all served up with a side of hearty food. The dishes here were more than just sustenance. They were a taste of a young nation's spirit. Join us as we explore 20 incredible foods that sustained, comforted, and defined colonial America. Number 1. Roast venison. Roast venison was a prized dish in colonial taverns. Hunters brought in fresh game and tavern cooks slow roasted it over open flames, basting it with herbs and fat until tender. The aroma of sizzling meat filled the room, mingling with the smoke of the hearth. Served with root vegetables and thick gravy, it was a meal that satisfied both weary travelers and local townsfolk. Beyond nourishment, it was a symbol of abundance and frontier resourcefulness, reminding everyone that the New World provided richly for those who dared to settle it. Preparation often involved marinating the lean meat in a mixture of vinegar and spices for several days to both tenderize it and reduce the gamey flavor. The roast would then be skewered and turned over a fire, allowing the fat and juices to self-baste for hours, resulting in a deep caramelized crust and an incredibly juicy interior. Number 2. Pottage. This wasn't just soup. Pottage was the ultimate comfort food, a thick, nourishing stew simmered all day in a large iron pot over the tavern fire. Made with whatever vegetables were available, cabbage, carrots, turnips, and often a bit of salted meat or beans, it was a dish of humble origins, yet deeply satisfying. Travelers would warm their hands around a wooden bowl, its rich, savory steam rising, providing cheap, sustaining fare that fueled long journeys and even longer conversations. The name pottage comes from the word pot. These stews were often perpetual, with new ingredients being added to the same pot over days or even weeks. This method, while efficient, meant the flavor could be unpredictable, but it was a guaranteed hot meal for a small price. Number 3. Welsh rabbit. Rare bit. Forget what you think you know about cheese on toast. Welsh rabbit was an art form. Thick slices of bread, often toasted by the fire, were covered in a rich molten sauce of melted cheese, often a sharp cheddar, mixed with ale or milk and seasoned with mustard and spices. It was a quick, savory, and surprisingly filling meal that paired perfectly with a tankard of ale, a favorite among those looking for a flavorful bite without the weight of a full roast. The term Welsh rabbit is believed to be a humorous nod to the Welsh people's reputation for being unable to afford meat. The dish provided a clever, vegetarian-friendly alternative that was rich in protein and calories, making it a filling stand-in for a meat-based meal. Number 4. Fish and chips, colonial style. While not quite the fish and chips we know today, colonial taverns often served fried fish, especially in coastal towns. Freshly caught cod or haddock would be lightly floured or battered and fried in lard or animal fat, served alongside thick-cut, often twice-fried potatoes. The crisp exterior of the fish giving way to flaky white meat was a simple pleasure. It was a dish that spoke of the sea's bounty and the satisfying crunch of hearth-cooked goodness. Colonial frying was a deep, rustic process. Potatoes would be cut and parboiled before a final fry, giving them a soft interior and a crisp, golden crust. The fish batter, often a simple mix of flour and water, would result in a thin, crunchy coating that perfectly complemented the fresh catch. Number 5. Shepherd's pie. A hearty, layered dish, shepherd's pie was the ultimate one-pot meal for a busy tavern. A savory base of minced or diced meat, often lamb or beef, simmered with vegetables like peas and carrots and a rich gravy, then topped with a generous layer of creamy mashed potatoes and baked until golden brown. Each spoonful was a comforting blend of textures and flavors, a truly satisfying meal that warmed the belly and the soul after a long day's labor or travel. This dish was an excellent way to use up leftover roasted meat from previous meals. The finely chopped meat would be mixed with gravy and vegetables, ensuring nothing went to waste, a common practice in a time before refrigeration. Number 6. Plowman's lunch. Simple, fresh, and deeply satisfying, the plowman's lunch was a staple for workers and travelers alike. It wasn't cooked but assembled. A generous chunk of crusty bread, a wedge of local cheese, perhaps cheddar or a firmer farm cheese, some pickled onions, and maybe a piece of cured meat. It was the original grab-and-go meal, offering a refreshing contrast of textures and tastes, a straightforward pleasure that spoke of the land and honest toil. This lunch was a simple meal that was easy to prepare and didn't require cooking. The sharp tang of the pickled onions and cheese cut through the rich flavors of the bread and meat, making it a surprisingly balanced and refreshing meal. Number 7. Syllabub. For a touch of elegance or a sweet finish, syllabub was a popular choice. This light, frothy dessert was made by whisking sweet wine or cider with cream and sugar until it formed soft peaks. Sometimes flavored with lemon or nutmeg, it was served in tall glasses, its airy texture a delightful contrast to the heavier tavern fare. It was a sophisticated treat that offered a moment of refined indulgence amidst the rustic charm of the tavern. Traditionally, syllabub was made by milking a cow directly into a bowl containing the wine and sugar, allowing the froth to form naturally from the mixture of warm milk and the acidic wine. It was a dessert that combined the rural with the refined, a perfect example of colonial creativity. Number 8. Rye bread and butter. Often served as an accompaniment to almost any meal, fresh-baked rye bread was a fundamental part of the colonial diet. Hearty, dense, and full of flavor, it was baked fresh daily in the tavern's own oven. Smeared with generous amounts of churned butter, it was simple yet profound, a symbol of sustenance, community, and the comforting taste of home. It absorbed gravies, provided a base for cheese, and was a constant presence on every tavern table. Rye was a more resilient grain than wheat in the colonial climate, making it a staple for bread making. The high fiber content and dense texture of rye bread meant it kept for a long time and provided lasting energy for a hard day's work. Number 9. Fricasseed. Chicken, a common farm animal, found its way onto tavern menus in the form of a rich fricassee. Pieces of chicken would be gently stewed in a creamy, savory sauce, often enriched with herbs, mushrooms, or root vegetables. The tender meat, bathed in its flavorful broth, was a dish of understated elegance. It was a comforting alternative to roasted meats, offering a different texture and a sauce perfect for soaking up with a piece of fresh bread. A fricassee is a cooking method where meat is sautéed and then simmered in its sauce. This technique ensured the chicken remained moist and tender, and the resulting sauce was so flavorful that it made a small amount of meat go a long way, a key consideration for tavern economics. Inside. Number 11. Boiled beef and cabbage. A testament to hearty, no-nonsense cooking, boiled beef and cabbage was a substantial and deeply flavorful dish. A large joint of beef, often a less tender cut, would be slowly simmered with wedges of cabbage, carrots, and potatoes until everything was incredibly tender. The broth would be rich and savory, and the meal itself was a symbol of strength and endurance, providing much-needed sustenance for the colonial populace. The long, slow boiling process was an excellent way to make tough cuts of meat edible and flavorful. The vegetables and meat would cook together, allowing their flavors to meld into a rich, comforting broth. It was a simple yet effective way to feed a crowd. Number 12. Custard and tarts. For those with a sweet tooth, taverns often offered a variety of custards and fruit tarts. Baked in the hearth, these treats could range from simple egg custards flavored with nutmeg to more elaborate tarts filled with seasonal fruits like apples, berries, or peaches. The rich, creamy texture of custard, or the sweet tart burst of fruit in a flaky crust, provided a delightful contrast to savory meals, a small luxury to end an evening. Tarts were an early form of pie, often with a simple crust and a filling of fruit, custard, or sweetened vegetables. They were a more rustic version of the sweet pies we know today, a testament to the fact that colonial bakers made do with what was available. Number 13. Peas porridge. Peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. This old rhyme speaks to the ubiquity of peas porridge. It was a thick, savory pudding or stew made from dried peas, often simmered with salted pork or bacon. Hearty and incredibly filling, it was a cheap source of protein and energy, a staple that could be kept warm and served throughout the day, providing sustenance to all who entered. Dried peas were a long-lasting and inexpensive food source, making peas porridge a go-to meal for taverns, serving a large and diverse clientele. The dish could be served hot as a main meal or cooled and sliced as a savory side. Number 14. Colonial succotash. A true American invention, succotash was a vibrant and flavorful dish combining corn, lima beans or other shell beans, and sometimes other vegetables or even a bit of salted meat. It showcased the bounty of the New World and the culinary ingenuity born from Native American traditions. The sweet burst of corn kernels against the creamy beans created a satisfying texture and taste, a uniquely colonial side dish. Succotash was a direct borrowing from Native American cuisine, who had been cultivating corn and beans for centuries. The dish was a great way to combine two key crops and create a nutritionally complete and flavorful side dish that became a staple of colonial kitchens. Number 15. Pancakes or hoe cakes. Simple, quick, and satisfying, pancakes or hoe cakes were a popular, versatile item. Made from cornmeal or wheat flour and cooked on a griddle over the fire, they could be savory, served with bacon, ham, or a savory gravy, or sweet, drizzled with molasses or maple syrup if available. Their warm, soft texture was a comforting start to a cold morning or a quick, filling supper. Hoe cakes earned their name from being traditionally cooked on the blade of a hoe over an open fire. Made from a simple batter of cornmeal, water, and salt, they were a cheap and easy way to get a hot meal in a hurry. Number 16. Oysters on the half shell. In coastal taverns, fresh oysters were a common and prized delicacy. Served raw on the half shell, perhaps with a dash of vinegar or a squeeze of lemon, they offered a taste of the sea's crisp, briny freshness. Enjoyed by all classes, from sailors to merchants, these succulent morsels were a refreshing treat, often accompanied by lively conversation and a tankard of ale. Oysters were so abundant in the colonial era that they were a food for the working class, not a luxury. Tavern keepers often shucked them right at the bar, serving them alongside simple condiments. Their freshness was a sign of the tavern's proximity to the coast. Number 17. Cider braised pork was a fundamental meat in colonial America, and slow braising it in hard cider was a popular method. The acidity of the cider tenderized the meat, infusing it with a rich, sweet, and slightly tangy flavor. Cooked until it practically fell apart, served with its own flavorful sauce, this dish was a celebration of local ingredients and a deeply comforting, savory meal. Pork was a staple because pigs were relatively easy to raise and their meat could be preserved through salting and smoking. Braising it in cider, a common drink in colonial times, added a unique regional flavor and made the meat incredibly tender and moist. Number 18. Game pie. For a grander, more substantial meal, a game pie was often featured. Filled with a mixture of diced wild game, rabbit, squirrel, pigeon, or venison, simmered in a rich gravy with herbs and vegetables, all encased in a savory pastry crust and baked until golden. Slicing into a game pie revealed a delicious, complex filling, a true feast that spoke of the hunter's skill and the tavern cook's artistry. Game pies were often a sign of a special occasion or a tavern of higher status. The crust acted as a protective barrier, keeping the filling moist and flavorful, and the ingredients often varied based on what was hunted or trapped in the surrounding woods. Number 19. Indian pudding. A distinctively American dessert, Indian pudding was made from cornmeal, molasses, milk, and spices like cinnamon and ginger, slow baked until thick and creamy. It was a comforting, warm pudding with a unique, slightly gritty texture and a deep, sweet, spiced flavor. Often served with a dollop of cream, it was a truly warming and satisfying end to a colonial meal, a taste of comfort from familiar ingredients. The Indian in its name refers to the use of cornmeal, which was often called Indian corn at the time. This dessert was a wonderful example of adapting traditional English puddings with New World ingredients, creating a distinctly American dish. Number 20. Cheesecake, colonial style. Not the creamy, dense cheesecakes of today. Colonial cheesecakes were lighter, often baked with ricotta or cottage cheese, eggs, sugar, and sometimes flavored with rosewater or citrus zest. Baked in a simple crust, they offered a delicate sweetness and a tender texture, a more refined dessert that still spoke of homemade goodness and the simple pleasures of the dairy. Colonial cheesecakes were more like savory puddings than desserts. They were often made from soft curds, which were a common byproduct of butter and cheese making. The addition of spices and sweeteners elevated them into a special treat. Step back in time to the 1700s. The heavy wooden door of a colonial tavern swings open, and the warmth of a roaring fire washes over you. This wasn't just a place to eat, it was the heart of a community, a bustling hub where news, politics, and friendship were all served up with a side of hearty food. The dishes here were more than just sustenance. They were a taste of a young nation's spirit. Join us as we explore 20 incredible foods that sustained, comforted, and defined colonial America.